Welcome to the Moulding Health Show. Our goal is to leverage the wisdom and experience of our healthcare practitioners to set you on a path of self-discovery and healing. These insights, coupled with a multidisciplinary approach to each area of interest, should provide an invaluable resource to everyone looking for a better approach to health. In this episode of the show, we speak to Candice Janks about mindfulness from a counseling psychologist perspective. Candice Janks, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on board. Thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this topic. We're going to be talking about mindfulness. And I told you just before we started, I'm actually so surprised because we're on about 40 odd episodes that we haven't come across the topic already. Because I think in the healthcare space, it's been one of those brewing topics, over the last few years. So really glad to, unpack this with you. But before I do that, I do want to ask, because we haven't really talked before this, so I want to ask Shaz, how did she even meet you and convince you to be on the show?
Okay, so Candice's name kind of stuck in my head. I think at some point Candice was trying out one of our softwares. The surname stuck in my head and I came across her on my LinkedIn connections and when we were looking for episodes, and I've been trying to get somebody on board for mindfulness for about 8 months.
Oh, wow.
And Candice came back almost immediately after getting the message and said, I would really be keen to do this. And that was it. We set up the interview and here we are.
That's amazing. So, so thanks, Candice, for doing that. But yeah, I probably was joking about that one. But I think Shaz was trying, as she said, which is also interesting, because as I said, I thought it was quite a brewing topic for a while. So, but firstly, to kick it off, tell us what is mindfulness, just so that if anyone hasn't come across that concept before, what would it be?
Thanks. I find it interesting. The definition of mindfulness, there's a couple of components to it, and I'll get into the definition now. But exactly to your point and what you're saying, that this topic has been brewing, but when you come to trying to define it, I'm realizing how much we maybe don't know or really understand what mindfulness is. We've all got ideas or thoughts around it, but trying to define it and then actually work through it requires a little bit more. So I'm really glad to be here to discuss this topic. So mindfulness in essence is the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So there's a lot to that. So the first bit is it's paying attention on purpose. So it's intentionally paying attention to the present moment as it's unfolding. So being here now. And then the final part of it about being non-judgmental, I think is incredibly crucial. So a lot of the time we spend so much energy thinking about things, worrying about things, being in the past, being in the future, letting our mind run away with us, that we're missing the unfolding of the moment as it's happening, and getting lost in the stories in our head. So what mindfulness is, it's about bringing that awareness and attention now. Right now as it's unfolding, and then not letting that critical inner mind run away with you. So in terms of, I might say I'm feeling tired, and then my mind goes, I shouldn't be tired, or I need to do this, or it runs away. And before I know it, it's become a whole new thing. So mindfulness is about that awareness of the moment and being intentional about it, which is a skill that we actually have to develop. It's not something that comes naturally.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And I actually never came across the term non-judgmental though, in the space of mindfulness. And maybe it's just me, but and whenever I think of mindfulness, I can't help but thinking meditation. I mean, it's like in my mind, I immediately go to that picture. Many years ago, my wife and I went to some Buddhist retreat, and it was called Emanyeni, and they practice a lot of that, meditation stuff. And it was the same thing. But I'm interested about the non-judgmental, and when you say that as well, I can't help but thinking. I mean, as a person, we probably our biggest critique. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, we always think of all of these worst thoughts, and we almost we never tell that to someone else, but you tell that to yourself, a lot. Is that what you mean by non-judgmental? It's almost like for yourself, non-judgmental.
Very much so. So judgmental for yourself first, but I mean, mindfulness also works in relationships. So it's also really important to remember first about not being judgmental of ourselves, but then also not being judgmental of others, and being present in the company of others, and not in your mind or what you think is the reality or what you think is the truth. So, and I'll break that down just now when we talk about the principles of mindfulness, because non-judging is an important principle in all of that. But it is really about not being critical of yourself. Our mind will have an almost knee-jerk reaction to criticize, to see the danger, to see, and it's a coping mechanism, it's a defense mechanism. It doesn't come from nowhere. It exists because we want to see if there's any danger. But that then becomes a habit, that becomes an unconscious pattern of relating to ourselves and the world. And then that's all we see. That becomes our reality. So mindfulness is asking us to see things clearly and from a fresh perspective. There's the beginner's mind. I'll get into that now as well. But all of that without that constant judgment of going in of what I think I should be thinking, what I should be thinking, what I must be thinking. All of that is mindfulness is asking you to quieten all of that down in terms of non-judging.
You know, I really like the fact that you said, you know, mindfulness is not just about not judging yourself, but about not judging somebody else when you are in a conversation, especially when you think of couples, when that argument comes up and it starts to get a little bit heated, you find that instead of slowing down and listening to what the other person is saying, you're already coming up with 5 or 6 or 7 answers, and you're actually missing the point of the argument. So would mindfulness be along the line of actually just slow down, be present, hear what the other person is saying, so you're actually listening to hear as opposed to listening to respond?
Exactly. And we also realize that these patterns of relating, so this, again, it speaks to that beginner's mind. Can I come into this with an openness and not that assumption that I know exactly how this is going to go? We've been down this road before. He's going to say this and I'm going to say this, and then it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the whole time we are relating that way, it's almost that we will attack, but to defend ourselves. So I'm not hearing what you're saying, because the whole time I'm sitting here going, I need to defend myself. I need to defend myself. There is an app called Calm. I don't know if you've heard of it. I think it's one of the most popular ones in terms of meditation. And there was an example given on it that I thought was so powerful, and I use it a lot in therapy to describe relationships and communication. That if you could imagine a team of researchers going to study a troop, I think it's actually called a band of gorillas, the collective noun. And they arrive and they've traveled all this way, and they can't get anywhere close to these gorillas because they are aggressive, they're hostile, and now they don't know what to do. And eventually one researcher goes off on his own, and not only can he get close, he's welcomed in. And the kind of the lesson in that is, when we go into any interaction, we go into it armed with our guns, not to hurt somebody else, but to protect ourselves. So you're going into this new situation. I don't know what to expect, so I'm going to go in and arm myself. And these gorillas are going, well, I don't know what these people want. I don't know. This is all foreign to me. I'm going to protect myself. And that becomes a barrier to communication. So the same way that mindfulness opens us up, the non-judgment and the beginner's mind, can I show up in this communication, this interaction, this experience with an open mind, so that I can receive something maybe differently to what I think it's going to be, or what I so-called know it's going to be.
I love that story. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. In corporate, we would actually go intentionally into meetings, as you said, armed, because if you went into a meeting with 5 people and you didn't have at least 5 people in a meeting, it was kind of uneven. So, and the reason I'm saying that is it's almost like we get taught, or it's an instinctive thing to arm up. It's not an instinctive thing to let your guard down and be vulnerable. It's just a natural, process. And like you said, probably self-preservation or something like that. But I love that story.
Very much so.
So you mentioned principles. Can you take us through that? Because I would love to understand that.
Yeah, sure. So there are 7 principles to mindfulness. So and I'll go through them briefly. You don't have to go into massive detail, but a lot of them are already there in that definition. So again, mindfulness is about paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So the very first one is non-judging, right? And it's about seeing things as they are, not as I think they are, not as I want them to be, not as they should be, as they are. And that way we can see things more clearly rather than through a distorted lens. I think that's really important. We have a way of, when we judge our experiences, we get locked into these automatic reactions, which are maybe not even objective or based in reality at all, but that becomes your reality, and that gets in the way for our own progress, for our own healing, and for relationships. So that's the first bit of the non-judging. The second principle is patience. And it's this concept that open to each moment unfolding in its own time. And patience is definitely a form of wisdom, and not something in today's age that many of us, I speak for myself, it's not an easy skill to develop, but it's important in terms of mindfulness that it reminds us that our moments don't have to be full with activity and ticking off boxes and getting things done, the doing of life. It doesn't have to be that way to know that it still has meaning, it still has purpose, so we can open ourselves up to things being rather than the doing. And there's that whole concept of the butterfly spends all this time as a caterpillar and coming through this metamorphosis. And that's what mindfulness also reminds us, that being open to the moment and letting it unfold at its own time, even if we don't understand what that time is. So patience, important. That beginner's mind is the third principle. So often we let our thinking and our beliefs about what we know, what we think we know, prevent us from seeing things as they actually are. And we take for granted the ordinary things, and we don't see the richness of life as it's unfolding because I'm so stuck in my head, or I'm so worried about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's really asking you to look at things with fresh eyes. And there is an invitation, and I really like how it was phrased in one of the mindfulness books. The founder of Western understanding of mindfulness is Jon Kabat-Zinn. And in his book, Full Catastrophe, he asks us, the next time you see someone who is familiar to you, ask yourself if you're seeing this person with fresh eyes, as he or she really is, or are you seeing them only as a reflection of your own thoughts about this person? And I thought that was really, really well said. You know, we take for granted the people that have been in our lives for so long, but are we looking at them for who they are, or am I seeing them through my own lens of thinking and processing and my own emotions? Am I seeing them for who they are? So that's what the beginner's mind speaks about. The fourth one is trust. And that's really about learning to trust yourself, trusting your own intuition, trusting your gut, trusting that your body and your mind and your emotions will tell you what's going on, and not having to look outside yourself for the answers, not looking to society to tell you where I should be or what I should be feeling or thinking. It's about learning to trust yourself. And through that, we get to trust others in relationships better as well. So definitely that element of trusting yourself and listening to your own being and knowing that. The fifth principle is non-striving. So really mindfulness is about like a non-doing. It's about shifting from the doing and coming back to the sense of being. We are human beings, not human doings. And it's asking you to just be in the moment as it is, not having to change it, not having to shift it, as it is. And it's about a journey that leads nowhere but to who you are. And I love that. That's what mindfulness is. The sixth one is acceptance. Okay? And acceptance is one of the wings of mindfulness. So you have awareness as the first wing, and then you have acceptance. And acceptance is about the fact of how things are. It's seeing things as they are, not how you wish them to be, not as you think they should be. And that's not about a passive resignation to how things are. And it's not about saying, oh, well, I can't change who I am. It is what it is, or this is the way it is. It's not saying that. It's saying that eventually at some stage, we have to realize that this currently is the situation. And when we can accept it, we are not spending all this energy fighting and straining and denying where we're at or what we're feeling. We spend so much time avoiding it or busying ourselves from feeling what we are, just accepting right now, this is the way it is. And then the last principle of mindfulness is letting go. And that is a very difficult thing for human beings to do. We don't let go easily, but it is an incredibly important aspect of mindfulness. And we will notice that there are certain thoughts and emotions that kind of we cling to or hold on to more than others. Anything that is emotionally charged, positive or negative, when we're feeling overwhelmed or when we're feeling incredibly happy, we either want to hold on to it or we want it to disappear or we want to avoid it. And this letting go is about letting things be as they are right now. And then one of my favorite quotes in terms of mindfulness is simply being aware of what is happening right now without wishing it were different, enjoying the pleasant without holding on to it when it changes, which it will, and being with the unpleasant without fearing it will always be this way, which it won't. I think that really sums up mindfulness for me quite well, where we want to hold on when things are great and we want to get rid of it when it's not, and about settling in with whatever it is that's going on.
That was so incredible. Hey, I mean, like, if everyone was mindful, then we probably solve all of the world's problems. Like,
for sure, I don't know if I'd have a job.
Yeah, I mean, like, if I just think of that, but then I think of the complexity of it, because I mean, the current moment is so fleeting. To be able to keep hold of it is like, yeah, it's almost like, it's so difficult because like, and then it's the future because like you're already there, or it's the past. And Shaz and I used to say this all the time, but human beings are the only ones that can almost scare themselves completely just by sitting in the middle of a room and there's no danger. Like, you could scare yourself. Like, it's also the reason I don't watch horror movies, because it's like, life is bad enough. I just like, I'm not putting that stuff in my mind as well. But I love what you said. I mean, have you ever had it likened to physics? Like recently with the whole Elon Musk and Big Bang Theory, got to learn a lot more about physics. But as you approach that, as you talked, that first principles, I don't know, I'm not a fully with physics, but, he talks about the same things, going back to first principles and kind of seeing what it is and not being judgmental, not having a preconception. Have you ever seen it likened like that?
Not totally. I hear what you're saying. It's a really nice way to put it. I think more than anything else, and physics is just making me think about this, is it's about getting back in touch with nature for me, about getting back in touch with the basics. We think we are so highly evolved with our technology and all of this, and we can send people to space and we can do all of this incredible stuff, but I don't know what's going on inside me. So we've got all this technology and all the stuff that's going on, but the basics, the essence of who we are and coming back to the moment, we're missing that. And we can get those cues, excuse me, through nature, coming back to nature, the rhythms of nature, and understanding that, the ebbs and flows. So you make a really good point. And my physics is not great either. Definitely one of the subjects I dropped early in school. But I hear what you're saying in terms of the science, and I link that to the nature and the relativity of everything. It's all interconnected. It's all related.
Now, Candice, I really like that you actually said it that way, that it is all interconnected. And when you really start thinking about it, oftentimes your mental well-being affects your physical well-being. Or the other way around. I mean, if you've had a limb amputated, it is going to have a mental impact on you that you might not be prepared for, but actually being able to, like you say, stop, sit down, acknowledge, accept, remove all judgment, and actually be able to deal with that in that moment really helps. So, and I really like that acceptance bit that you had earlier. I was watching a TikTok video, but it's Tom Hanks with a couple of other actors, and he's talking about something really bad happens, but there's this saying of this too shall pass. And then he goes, okay, yeah, but you're having the greatest day of your life and everything's going well. This too shall pass. And that's that concept of acceptance. Even if things are really bad, they can get better, but accept where it is and move on. And, when they're really good, appreciate that they're really good and accept that, but then be able to move forward, because otherwise we tend to hang on to those negative emotions or happy emotions and that kind of thing. But how does somebody maintain that, consciously being mindful throughout their day-to-day interactions?
So I think making it conscious, so that's the awareness part, is important, but it's also about intentionality. We take for granted that this is something I should just be able to know, or just be present, or just stay focused, or just be here now. It's really easy in theory, but it's not a skill or something that we've spent a lot of time developing. So, cultivating mindfulness is one thing, maintaining it is a whole different beast, but it is about the intentionality of it. And it's the same as if you liken it to an athlete running a marathon and the training that's required. You don't just train on the days that it's sunny. You don't just train on the days that you feel like it. You there's a commitment, there's motivation, there's moving towards something, but that takes consistency. It takes practice. And I think that's the thing about mindfulness as well. It's a practice, and it is something we need to be intentional about until the point that comes where it becomes easier to implement it through our days. But it is about intentionally making the time. And even if it's pockets of time throughout the day of coming in, tapping into the breath, and we can talk about ways that we can cultivate mindfulness, but it is about intentionally wanting to, and then doing the practice and making the commitment towards it. And that's why I'm saying I liken it to an athlete. It's you can't go to the gym once, do a sit-up once and think I'm going to have a six-pack. I can't have a shower once or brush my teeth once and go, well, my teeth are clean, I never have to do it again. It's something that we commit to every single day. But when it becomes part of our routine and our lifestyle, then it doesn't feel like it's so much effort anymore. It's just one of those things that we do and we can tap into when and how we need.
I mean, and that's the reason. I mean, every so often I reflect back in terms of the show and some of the people we've had, and I mean, like having amazing people like you on is like still incredible for me, because it's exactly what you just said now. It's like the simplest thing to do. Everyone says, do 20 minutes of exercise every day, and you would think, in a 24-hour day, and if you take 8 hours of sleep, still out of that, you still don't have 20 minutes to do exercise. And there's something like, as a society or something, we need people like yourself to help us. Like, how do you do that? Like, because, as you said, you almost like when you're growing up, you get trained, like you have to brush your teeth in the morning and before you go to bed. But for the rest of that, exercise, as you said now, which is, I think is absolutely key. Mindfulness, we don't get trained on that stuff. And that's no longer an excuse because we have the internet and TikTok, like Shaz mentioned, but we still don't do it. Yeah, so there's definitely something like a miss with how we approaching it. The other thing I noticed is, like you mentioned athletes, and I like using that example, because if you look at athletes, how much of people they have around them supporting them, and yet we go through life and we figure we just gonna do it. Like, we don't spend any time on ourselves. We don't get professionals like yourself to help us, and we just figure we're just going to be amazing. And it's like kind of so warped, in terms of that thinking. But everyone does it, so it's not like it's a new thing. Very, very interesting, though. Sorry, you.
And I think again, there's only so much that time that we've got in terms of what we can study and what we're taught at school. And whilst a lot of it was valuable, a lot of it maybe not so valuable, but we don't spend time understanding how to regulate your emotions or how do I create mindfulness. I know that there's a shift, and it's really exciting for me that mindfulness is coming into schools and it's coming into corporates, and there is definitely a better understanding and a kind of delving into this that's not taken for granted in the way that I will just get through it, and recognizing that. But we're still a way to go in understanding that this is something that we need support, and we need, again, commitment to. We focus more on the physical stuff that we can see, not so much the internal stuff that we can't see. And I'm hoping that, having discussions like this opens us up to that we don't just take for granted, well, this is something I should know or something I can implement. It takes practice like everything else. Some people might run easier or it comes more naturally to them, but there's still training involved. And the same concept for anything that we learn psychologically, whether it's regulating our emotions, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's understanding depression, all of that. It is just about having the resources and information available.
So I think we did an amazing job at setting the stage as to why we would want to be mindful, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking how do we become mindful, like you mentioned. But before I do that, I have to ask, so you have the conscious mind, the unconscious, and the subconscious, and only recently I figured out where those kind of fit in. But how does mindfulness, does it touch on each one of those, or just one of those? How does that work? So
mindfulness is really about trying to take what's unconscious or subconscious and make it conscious. So that's, again, the intentionality. That's where, paying attention on purpose comes in. It's about saying, I'm making conscious what it is that I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I am sensing, and not letting it all sit there buried underneath all these ingrained patterns of understanding. It is about making it conscious, my experiences and what's going on. We have a lot, we can talk about it a bit more when we discuss stress. I think it comes in quite powerfully, where we have that automatic fight, flight, or freeze response, which is unconscious. It's instinctual. It's from our reptilian brain. And that is there to protect us. Mindfulness is teaching us how to respond instead of reacting unconsciously. Again, that whole idea of trying to protect myself, defend myself. It's about going, is this really a threat? Am I under threat? Can I use my conscious prefrontal cortex to think things through rationally, or am I just going to react in an emotional way, let things kind of blow out of proportion because of whatever it is that I'm experiencing that I'm not in touch with because it's unconscious? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm so glad that you answered it like that, and that is the truth. Because what I was thinking was, like, if you can make it unconscious, like I think one of the practitioners mentioned, like breathing is unconscious, like as in, like the body just knows it needs to do that. And if you can almost train the body to just know this is how you need to react, then the conscious becomes so much more easier, because the conscious doesn't have to keep on fighting, like these past experiences and whether it should be doing this. It just does it, like, because that's what it needs to do. And I think it was Jeannie Cavey, because like she said, like suicide, it's like lots of people try to commit suicide, but no one has ever committed suicide by just stopping to breathe. And I thought that's pretty interesting, like that would be very easy, but the body simply doesn't allow you to do that, and I thought that is pretty amazing. So almost like if we can feed the body what we think it should do, like mindfulness, you automatically become better. Is that how you would see it as well?
Yeah, very much so. There's all of this. Our bodies are incredible. They've been taking care of us so well, and we only really realize that when something goes wrong. Right? When you're ill, when you're not feeling well, when you stub your baby toe and you realize how much pain can exist in your baby toe. You don't notice it when it's all working well, when I'm breathing fine. It's when, with COVID and people's lung capacities and how ill they've been, whatever the case may be, it's only when I can't breathe so easily, or when I'm struggling with something, that I realize, oh, something might be going wrong. So our bodies are taking care of us all the time. Unconsciously, yes, we breathe all the time. It's not something I have to bring my attention to. That being said, though, the power of the breath and its connection to mindfulness is so important. And we can use the breath, something that is there keeping us alive, keeping our organs oxygenated and working optimally, we can also, by directing our attention to the breath and changing how we breathe, maximize those benefits. So I'm glad you brought up the breath. It's something I would like to discuss more. We can jump into it now or later, but it's an incredible tool that we have at our disposal all the time, and we can use it for optimal health and well-being.
I'm also really glad Oliver brought up the breath, and so did you, Candice. Having recently gone through therapy myself, my psychologist actually said something that stuck with me, and speaking of mindfulness, really makes me think about it. She said, when you get into a situation, don't allow your brain to be hijacked. Mm-hmm. And, as we were discussing it more, what happens is your body actually knows. You can start to feel your anger, maybe you feel it as a heat and it starts to rise. And when it reaches here, you have to walk away, or your subconscious is going to overtake your conscious mind and you're going to defend and protect yourself. But that simple act of, you feel that anger rising and actually being able to change your breathing slightly, slow it down and just calm that anger back down, sort of puts the subconscious mind slowly back at ease and allows you to consciously continue with the situation. So I have to agree, just that simple act of being able to change that unconscious ability to breathe and actually use your breath to regulate your emotion is absolutely amazing.
Absolutely. And there's nothing more annoying than when you are highly agitated or angry and somebody says, just calm down and breathe, or just breathe, take 10 deep breaths. There's nothing more annoying or unhelpful in that moment than you telling me to just calm down and breathe. But what we actually need to do is exactly that, is calm down and breathe, because that then helps us respond instead of react through, again, that need to protect and defend ourselves. And again, our breath is so incredibly powerful that it can shift the weather conditions internally, if you will. When it's all at boiling points, it can help calm everything down so I can think clearly. And while that happens, speaking of that reptilian brain and the fight, flight, or freeze response, when we go into that response, our prefrontal cortex, our ability to think logically and rationally, is switched off when we are in that mode. And it's not about saying, I'm not taking accountability for my actions and I didn't know what was going on. It's not about that, but it's saying that I cannot think things through logically and rationally when I am in that high alert stage of fight, flight, or freeze, and cortisol and adrenaline are rushing through my body. I cannot think clearly. So if I use my breath to switch that back online, I can respond instead of hurting somebody I care about or hurting myself in the process by, running off with that reactivity.
Yeah, but isn't it an indication of life as well? Hey, the simplest things we just don't listen to. So it's, as you said, it's probably the best advice ever. But we choose not to do that. It's better just to fight through it. But I think we kept everyone in suspense. Can you please tell us, how do we become more mindful? I know we didn't cover meditation, but I'm assuming we're going to cover that at some point now.
Yeah. So I can bring that in quickly before we talk about cultivating mindfulness, because it is one of the tools we can use to cultivate the mindfulness. There is a misconception that meditation and mindfulness are the same thing. They're not. Meditation can be considered a tool. It's a skill that we can implement as a technique to become more mindful, but you don't need to meditate in order to be mindful, because a lot of people I speak to are like, yeah, I've tried meditating and it's not my thing. So and that's absolutely okay. You don't need to do the formal meditation if that's not something that speaks to you. But it is an important tool to be used to gain mindfulness so that we can become more aware, because meditation is really an activity to calm the mind, to be more present, And that's what we're trying to achieve in mindfulness. So it's just one way of doing that. And then we have different types of meditation that can speak to us. You don't have to do the formal sitting meditation and your hands like this and carrying on, even though some people want to do that. That's absolutely fine. But you can also do walking meditation. You can do a body scan. There's different types of meditation that you can tap into that's going to help develop the skills of mindfulness. So I think that's just an important distinction to make there. So you don't have to meditate in order to be mindful. So an important distinction there. In terms of cultivating mindfulness, how do we do that? It really is just about becoming more aware. So instead of spending all our energy and our time ignoring our emotions or repressing them or avoiding them or overworking or overeating or busying ourselves in our lives, it is about just becoming aware of where I'm at, what's going on, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's an important first step. And then we can tap into different kind of techniques or skills to become more mindful. So you have mindful movement, for example. So yoga is one of the most well-known mindfulness movement techniques that we use in terms of tapping into that mind-body space. And I think, yes, if I remember correctly, in Jon Kabat-Zinn's 8-week, he's got a program that he came up with, a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. It's an 8-week course. And that's how we kind of mindfulness came into the Western context. And he uses not only meditation, but he uses yoga and stretching, feeling into the body, connecting with the breath as a way to become more mindful. There's nothing to think about in the future. There's nothing to worry about in the past. All I'm doing right now is breathing into my whole body. So there's mindfulness movement. But mindfulness movement can also be a hike in nature and actually taking it all in with your senses, not getting stuck in the story in your head, but actually being part of that whole journey, feeling the ground underneath your feet, smelling what the air smells like, seeing what you're seeing. So really coming into your senses. And the easiest way to, I believe, to tap into mindfulness is by using your senses. You cannot smell into the future. You cannot eat or taste into the past. You can only use your senses right now as they're happening. So that sensory awareness is the way I use mindfulness, the most practical way I use mindfulness for myself and for clients, where you go through what using your senses provides you satisfaction and meaning and joy. What do you love to see and to taste and to touch? And when we start exploring that, we realize that it is the simple, everyday things, but we're missing it because our mind is somewhere else. So I love my cup of coffee in the morning. I love the smell of it. I love the taste of it. But how much do I miss of that experience because I'm running to a meeting, it's in a flask, I'm responding to emails, I'm not even tasting the coffee that I look forward to every morning. And it's really, mindfulness is about taking those moments to really be invested in that whole experience. Having a bath is one of my favorite self-care kind of strategies. I make time for it. I do the whole process of lighting the candles and doing the whole thing. It's almost like a ritual. But at its stage, I was missing the entire experience because I was writing my to-do list, I was responding to emails, and I've missed the entire sense of what that relaxation and what that experience was. So mindfulness is utilizing all these different tools to come into the present, to get out of our heads. And I went to a retreat at Emoyeni a couple of years ago, and Sue Cooper, who's a phenomenal psychologist who ran the retreat, explained that we spend so much time in our heads, we get stuck in our heads. And the easiest way to get out of our heads is to drop into our bodies. And the easiest way to drop into our bodies is to move them. And that's why I say mindful movement is so important. So that's another way. And then there's guided imagery. There's folding your washing. If you are just folding your washing, you're not thinking about anything else, and that is meditative for you, then that counts as mindfulness. If you are open to experiencing the moment as it is, without criticizing, without judging, being in it, that's mindfulness.
I love that. You know, and you said a really cool word now, which was rituals, and I think maybe that's the missing piece. I think we lose. I'm with you as well. I love the coffee thing, but you know, almost to the point where I want to grind the beans, and we've got one of those AeroPress. You know, like so it's not quick as you just click the button. You know, it takes me time to grind the beans. You know, put it into the AeroPress. You know, plunge it. You know, all of those things almost like adds to the experience for me, and then you get this perfect cup of coffee. But it's those rituals that you almost like, you know, because I was trying to think as well, because we've got two kids, and I'm trying to see like how I want them to be better, like in terms of knowing some of the stuff, is how would I incorporate some of that, you know, without being dictatorial, you know, about it, and get them to, you know, to actually, you know, sense it. But our little girl, for instance, you know, use, you know, folding the washing. So if she's folding the washing, she always wants to listen to music. And it's, for me, it's like an indication of what we all do. You know, like we can't just do one thing. You know, we have to do make the coffee and do something else. You know, we have to have the bath and also think about everything, every email that we got during the day. You know, it's like, so what you're saying is actually so true. Do you find with clients that, or and even with yourself, that those rituals almost force you to become mindful?
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that does go hand in hand, and it's almost it's an anchoring, it's a grounding that happens with a ritual. So I think it's a powerful way to tap into it. And people, in terms of how do I cultivate this through my day, that awareness all the time, there was an example given where if you go through a certain doorway that you might go through every single day, every time you go through that doorway, do a brief check-in. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? Where am I at? Or just increase that awareness. Or when you shower, just take that time to be present in the experience. Feel what the water feels like. Or when you're brushing your teeth, or when you're having that first mouthful in the morning, what can you actually taste your food? What does it taste like? Can you fully embody that experience as it's happening, rather than you're already on the next mouthful, you know, the next thing's going in your mouth before you've swallowed the one before, just so that you can move on to the next thing. So it's about slowing it down. It's about the being overdoing.
That's actually really interesting that you mentioned the brushing your teeth there, Candice. When we spoke to Cassie Foreman about burnout, and she was saying, you know, one of the ways to help manage stress is to take that 5 minutes that you're brushing your teeth in the morning and really just experience brushing your teeth. What does the toothpaste taste like? How do the bristles feel on your teeth and all of that? So that would be almost consciously at being mindful of the fact that you're brushing your teeth and you're not already thinking about your 27 meetings at the office. So how else would mindfulness help with stress management?
Before we go into stress management, I just wanted to add one more thing about the breathing, if that's okay. Well, it will go into stress management as well. Just the final bit in terms of cultivating mindfulness is using the breath. So, and I think it does tie into the stress management now as well. We inhale and we exhale all the time. Thank goodness, whilst we're alive, it's something that's there with us all the time. But if you look at babies and if you look at animals, you see how their belly moves when they breathe. And something has happened as we get older. We stop breathing all the way into and out of our bellies. We often, many of us are only breathing into our chests, not all the way down into our bellies. So this concept of the breath always being with us is true, but we also have to intentionally come back to the fact that, is my breathing as full as it can be? Am I oxygenating everything? Am I getting to everything the way that I needed to? So there's that aspect of breathing, that we're not breathing all the way into our bellies. And we can use that belly breathing as an anchor when our minds are overwhelmed with either thoughts or feelings or sensations, to kind of calm everything down. It's like the ocean. The waves might be choppy on the surface, but if you drop down 10, 20 meters underground, everything is cooler, everything is calmer. And that then helps us, again, respond instead of react. So we can use the breath, just spending some time doing just deep inhales and exhales to calm everything down, to create that sense of calm and peace, so I can handle that stress. Doesn't take away the stress, doesn't take away the trauma, it doesn't take away the things we are experiencing, but it helps me respond instead of react. And Viktor Frankl, a psychologist who came up with existential therapy after being in Auschwitz, says it is, what's that quote about stimulus and response? Got it, yeah. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And that is what mindfulness is about. It is giving us that anchor, that pause, so I can respond instead of react. And we can use our breath to do that. Also, if we have a longer exhale than an inhale, if we lengthen our exhale, we automatically tap into the parasympathetic nervous system. And I don't know how much in previous discussions has come up about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, fight and flight. So coming back, Shaz, to your question now about stress, we have two nervous systems working together. We've got the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, and freeze response, instinctual, automatic, keeps us alive, it keeps us going. And then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. And the two work together to keep homeostasis in our body. Fight, flight, or freeze is supposed to happen only when we feel threatened, in danger of our lives. So it is the impala that needs to run away or fight or play dead against the lion. Okay, we are experiencing fight, flight, or freeze whenever we feel threatened. So that can be an email from your boss, a fight with your partner, Joburg traffic. It exists. Okay, so we are going to be tapping into that fight, flight, or freeze, and it happens unconsciously, automatically. Adrenaline, cortisol rushing through our bodies, heightened nervous system. We're kind of running on that adrenaline. We need the other system to calm us down. The easiest way to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system is by having a longer exhale. Having a longer exhale automatically comes out of that fight or flight into the rest and digest, calms everything down. Prefrontal cortex snaps back on, and I can make a judgment call based on reasoning rather than reactive emotionality. And that is incredibly powerful. Just by having a longer exhale, it's phenomenal what that can do. So the power of the breath is huge. And sometimes coming into speaking about day-to-day stuff, if meditation is not your thing and you don't want to spend 10 minutes, 10 hours meditating, that's fine. You can set your clock for 2 minutes and focus on breathing for 2 minutes. Or every time you start the next thing, just breathe for a couple of counts. You can do, anyone who struggles with panic attacks or anxiety, the 4-7-8 breathing technique is very, very common, where you inhale for 4, you hold for 7, and you exhale for 8. Calms everything down. So we've got these tools that we can use throughout the day. I don't need to give 20 minutes or 20 hours of my day to mindfulness, but there are these pockets of time, and you just utilizing the breath goes a long way to doing that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, like the nervous system and all of that, and also the breath. I think in corporate we used to actually had this, the one manager, and every time we went into a hectic meeting, he would tell us, like, physically we must just breathe. But what you said about the belly, exactly that. We were quite simplistic with it, not like the amazing feedback you gave just now, or the reasons for doing it. But it's such an easy thing to just to get to do. And I spoke about our children, but I think that's quite an easy one, to get them into the habit of doing, the 4-7-8. And I think that's something I'm definitely going to work on. I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the thing I like about this, when we make it actionable, and especially if it's simple to do, if we can just get it into our, into our conscious mind that we just do that, like, it doesn't matter what happens. And I think for me, when I said that about the meetings, we would just do it, naturally after that. Because, if it was a hectic meeting, we just do it before the meeting. We already like calm down, before you go into that, which used to help.
It's amazing also, our bodies, if you've ever, I don't know, the last time you sighed out loud and somebody heard it, it's almost unconscious. It's our body's way of releasing tension. Many people think it's rude, and it can be perceived as rude socially, you sigh at someone, but that natural exhale of air when you're frustrated or whatever the case may be, and that sigh that comes out, it's our body's way of releasing tension. But I like what you also mentioned now. We do these things without necessarily realizing its significance or its power. And I think it also helps when we understand the connection, that there is science involved in this. This isn't just airy-fairy stuff that, to be an enlightened being, just, think positive or just be present. When we understand that there's biology and science, that there are mechanisms happening, I think it also can help with our accountability as well as our commitment to the practice. When I can understand, okay, well, actually what I'm doing is physically calming my nervous system down, that is something I can do. Great. Then I understand that better, and I will use it more. A Pilates instructor once explained to me, and it changed my entire relationship with exercise, where she said, the way we sit all day, every day, we are compressing our internal organs. We are squishing everything right now. And our most vital internal organs, where do they sit? Here, okay, on our bodies. When I physically move my body, I can get oxygen to my organs the way that they need to work optimally. When that was explained to me, my entire relationship with movement and exercise was completely different. It wasn't necessarily about weight management or control or anything like that. It was physically taking care of myself by moving it so that it can work optimally for me. And the same thing goes for mindfulness. How do I create space in my body, in my mind, so that I can show up and heal and be present and engage in life with all that it has to offer?
Yeah. Candice, that's actually, I think, so important, is we often look at things when it comes to the mind. And like you said, because you can't see a mental issue, you can't see anxiety. So somebody who suffers from anxiety kind of goes, well, I'm anxious. But actually being able to explain to them physically what changes when they use strategies like being more mindful, how it just adjusts that nervous system and pulls it back down again to a point where you can think rationally about what is happening. It's important for humans. We have this innate nature. We want to know why we're doing something. Mm-hmm. When somebody says to you, go over there, your natural instinct is, okay, but why? Mm-hmm. So, why do you need to change your breathing? Because it's giving that physiological change. So I watch a show called Atypical, mm-hmm. which is about absolutely brilliant. So but what I really love is whenever Sam is having a panic attack or he's getting a little bit anxious, mm-hmm. immediately he starts reciting the names of the 4 penguin species in Antarctica. And just thinking on that, that's making a mindful decision to slow down, go through the names as many times as you need to. But whilst you're doing that, his breathing slowing back down, and he can actually respond to the situation as opposed to reacting. Mm-hmm. And that just goes to show how powerful making a conscious decision to change your body's physiology can actually help with mental issues.
Absolutely. And it's a powerful tool to use, that reciting or that repetition or that something, because it just switches that automatic kind of, again, you're feeling threatened, you're feeling in danger, and then your mind runs away with you. When you now bring it to something like repetition or reciting something, or to your senses, what can I see, what can I taste, what can I touch right now? It brings us into the present moment, and it calms everything down so that I can see, am I still under threat? Because sometimes we are. Now I know I now need to continue reacting in a way that's going to keep me safe. Or has the threat passed, or was it in my head? But we are able to make a conscious decision moving forward, rather than getting sucked into that it becomes something bigger than it is.
Yeah, I love this whole conversation. And I mean, I think probably the last part is on how it can help us with stress management. And I'm asking this even from a selfish point of view. I mean, we've got a global remote team, and I always wonder, because we try, I try my best to create an environment that's not too stressful. We choose sometimes the clients we work with, and we find, if we find it's not quite working, sometimes we we say actually maybe this is not a good fit. So we try to do that. But I just wonder, especially with COVID and remote working, the impact on people, how's what's the best way to help people, around stress management? And I can't help but bring in like anxiety and mental illness and all of that stuff in terms of this. But is there anything that you find from a mindfulness point of view that would really help anyone dealing with that?
It sounds so simple in theory, but it's a really difficult thing for us to tap into if we're not used to it, if it's not our usual way of being. And that is to first tap into what it is that I'm feeling and experiencing. So when I run groups, the very first question I always ask is, how are you feeling right now? And you cannot say you feel fine, you cannot say you feel okay, and you cannot say you feel good. So when somebody asks how you are, you say I'm fine or I'm doing okay. Those are not emotions. Those are not actual emotions. So we don't really have vocabulary for it. But being able to acknowledge what it is that I'm feeling right now is so powerful, because we spend so much time either avoiding or distracting ourselves from what we're feeling, because I don't want to feel this. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. It's whatever it is. So I block it. I push it up. I suppress it. I internalize it, then that comes out somewhere else. So just the first step is to be aware, what is it that I'm currently feeling? What is it that I'm currently thinking? What is it that I'm currently sensing? And that is the essence of mindfulness. But that is the first thing. So I'm so stressed. Okay. How does that feel in your body? What are you stressed about? We can unpack it, but our thing is, I'm so stressed, and then listen to the narrative that then goes after that. I'm so stressed, I'm never going to get through this. Oh my gosh, that is all our mind talking. That isn't necessarily the stress itself. And it is about our relationship. We can't get rid of stress. Stress is going to be there no matter what. Okay. But it is our relationship to ourselves and our understanding of those stresses that we can shift. So, our top 3 scientifically proven stresses in this world: finances, work, relationships. We can't get rid of any of those things. Okay? And if we do, that comes with a different source of stress. So the stresses aren't going anywhere, but it is about how we relate to them, how we feel, how capable we feel in the face of them. That is going to determine how stressed we actually feel and what we do with it. So it is understanding, first of all, what it is that I am experiencing, and then to be able to respond, okay, so there's a lot on my plate, I'm feeling overwhelmed, okay, and then breaking it down further than that. But if I can't even conceptualize or understand that I'm feeling overwhelmed or why, I don't have a platform from which to go. So it starts, as basic as it sounds, it has to start with the basics, and then we work through it from there. Make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I'm also a firm believer, and exactly what you just said now. Like you can't get rid of the stuff. You just have to figure out what's going on right now. Like I'm a firm believer. I finished a book on Ikigai, and I think but they talk about lots of these principles as well. Like you don't overeat, as an example. And they studied, the Japanese people, that have like lived over 100 years. And one of the things was like, even with work, you want to, like there's no such concept as retirement, in the Japanese culture. And it's because you always work, that gives you purpose and gives you meaning and all of that stuff. And I'm a firm believer in that, but I also am a firm believer that you want to do the work that you want to do, because lots of us, many people just get stuck in the job, and it's because of the first thing that you mentioned, financials, like you have to do this. But not really being conscious of, do I really want to do this? Are there any alternatives? And I think even the whole remote working, like in my experience, it started off as a really cool idea, but I think lots of people are really struggling with it now, because lots of those things that you took for granted, like having the cup of coffee with, your teammates in the morning, just chatting about nothing, non-work related, you lose all of that stuff, and
Absolutely.
Yeah, and but I love that.
And I think you make an important point. We are all social creatures. As human beings, we are social creatures, and we long to connect. I'm an introvert. I can go days, weeks. I'm very happy to do a silent retreat over a weekend and not speak to another human being. But we do, whether it doesn't matter how introverted you are, we long to connect as social creatures, and it's missing out now on those connections. COVID, with not being able to touch loved ones, a hug, this and that. Oxytocin is released through touch. It is our feel-good love hormone and or neurotransmitter, and there were massive ramifications in terms of our psychological well-being and our overall health by not being able to, or to feel unsafe by touching another human being. Never mind this remote working where there isn't just that ability to connect by the water cooler or over a cup of coffee or whatever the case may be. It's taken a massive strain on relationships, definitely.
Mm-hmm. We had a midwife in, I think last week, Rueda Muller, and she was just saying, because I asked her the same question, the impact of COVID on, and she was talking about antenatal care. And she said, the babies that grew up during that time, they didn't have these people around them that could touch them and, cuddle, and because it wasn't allowed. And they could actually see like a difference with those babies that grew up at that time, which is like incredible. I mean, from a psychologist's perspective and a human behavior perspective. And almost like these babies got used to seeing people with masks, so when they saw smiles, they didn't know what to do with us. It's like, you can't, it's not like part of their realm, which I thought was so interesting. But humans are amazing. I think what you said earlier about the exercise, I'm terrible with that stuff. It's not a priority, but I think you gave me a new perspective on it. And I think, what I want to say with that is, like, even with that, it's something so simple, and how you framed it in terms of just like, taking care of your, your vital organs, I think is a really cool way, to think about it. So it's like with everything, it's just like a different perspective on it.
I just want to add there, I'm glad you said that about it not being a priority. I had a client who we were working through many things, and he just could never get to the gym. The big thing that he couldn't get right was exercise and getting to the gym. And I said to him, okay, you're a father of four, you're a director of a company, but without fail, you are here at therapy 5 o'clock every Thursday, unless you're on site somewhere. How come you can come to therapy every week with everything you've got on your plate, but you can't make it to gym? No, it's not in my diary. It's not a priority. It's not that important. And I was like, there you go. So one, if you need to diarize it, you diarize it. You put it out there, and it's a commitment. And also that key word, it's not a priority. Mindfulness is not a priority for people until we feel out of our minds, or we feel overwhelmed, or we feel overloaded or completely stressed out. Now it's a priority, but I haven't been practicing it long enough to be able to tap into it and utilize it in those times when it all feels like it's too much. That's why it needs to become a lifestyle or a practice that we engage in all the time. I can't just do something reactively. It is about, again, that intention, that being on purpose. And I think many people with exercise, with nutrition, with all these foundational building blocks that we need to start off with, it's not a priority. I will sleep when I'm dead. I will eat out of convenience, and I will exercise if I have the time or the energy or whatever. And until we shift our understanding of what we deem a priority, we're not going to make the time or the space for it. We have to consider it a priority for us to commit to the practice of it all the time, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And again, it sounds so easy. Just like commit and make a priority. But it's the simpler things, that we just have to get right. We're going to close up soon, and we'll ask for closing thoughts. But I love the conversation, and I have to ask you this. And get your thoughts on it. So I followed this entrepreneur, and he went through this condition, where his body almost got stuck into like a fight or flight response. And it just kind of happened. I don't know what the condition is, but he said he was playing a video game as an example, and his body just went into this, and he couldn't sleep. And I think that was the condition. He couldn't sleep. But through like multiple different, therapies and all of that stuff, the one that came out at the end was this idea of like, he would take like a thought, something that was really bugging him, and in his mind he would like, like almost like visualize it, He would like bring it towards him. He would like almost like enclose it, like, and he would push it out. And he said, just by doing that, like, and I couldn't help but thinking, yeah, that is mindful, right? Just by doing that, he almost minimized the problem. Have you ever come across that, like as a technique or anything like that?
Yeah, very much so. Visualization is incredibly powerful in whatever shape or form it comes in. And visualization is part of mindfulness, definitely. There's also Arianna Huffington speaks about it. She wrote a book called Thrive, which I think is brilliant in terms of how we can redefine success. And in that book, I'm pretty sure it's in that book, or maybe it's since then, she says that even writing it down, so you can use the mind exactly like that, as you say, or you spend some time, just even 10 minutes, jotting down everything that's worrying you, everything that's concerning you, and then you put that away. So it's a way of externalizing and not holding on to it, because our bodies hold on to so much stress and trauma. So it's a way of, if I'm externalizing, I'm writing it down, I'm putting it out there, and then I make the conscious decision to put that away now. Even that on its own can be really, really helpful, where it gives it voice, it gives it a space, but then it's also saying, okay, and now I'm now stepping into the next moment. And she says, if you need to do that at the end of your day, whatever it is, you have a notebook or something that's just for whatever's worrying you, whatever's lingering, so that you can hopefully let that go and step into the letting be as you are in the next moments. So also powerful way, but visualization, incredibly powerful.
Okay, thanks for saying that. I mean, I didn't understand the psychology around it, but what he said and what you just said now, also putting it away, that thought was what he said as well. Is like, lots of people say you must just throw it away or just forget it, and he says that was wrong, because what you want is like, like almost like tricking your mind that at some point, if you did need to uncover that, it's in this little box somewhere, it's in a in a writing pad that you wrote and you put away, but you just didn't throw it away, because that isn't going to help you, because that implies that you have to come back to it at some point, but you don't have it anymore. You've thrown it away. And it was just that, and constantly doing that visualization and obviously working on meditation, it almost helped him, like, kick the fight or flight response. And I thought that was interesting. It's amazing. Like the body is amazing. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal tool. Absolutely. And there's a rain, it's called RAIN meditation. Just speaking of this, which is an acronym, and I'll go through it really quickly. But the RAIN stands, the R stands for recognize. So you recognize right now, what is it that I'm experiencing? And it's not judging it, it's not pushing it away, it's not saying it must be something different. It's just recognizing right now that this is what it is. The A stands for allow. So it's about the permission for it to be there. I'm feeling stressed. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in my shoulders. That exists. I'm allowing it to be there. I'm not saying I mustn't be stressed. This isn't stress, just allowing it to be there. The I stands for investigate. So being curious, where is it sitting? How is it sitting? How does this feel? And then the N, and I think this is also the important part, the N stands for nurture. How do I nurture myself through this experience, whether it's positive, negative, neutral? What do I need to get through that? Because we also short circuit through stress, through mental health challenges. I go, I'm feeling this way, I shouldn't, or I don't want to, and that's it. We're missing a vital step of going, I can accept that this is happening, but I don't want it to be, so I cut it off. But what do I need to do to get through this? What do I need to nurture myself and to feel better, like you would a child or somebody that you care for? How do you do that for yourself? And it's not about saying I'm dismissing it or rejecting it or saying you're being silly. It is saying, this is what I'm experiencing right now, and this is what I need to get through it, whether it's taking a moment to breathe, whether it's having a cup of tea, whether it's listening to a song that resonates with you, and then moving on to the next thing. And I think that's also really, really important.
Love that. Shaz, on your side, I know we have to close up now. And actually, maybe one more thing before we finish. I mean, you mentioned, Candice, you mentioned the client, that's about prioritizing. Is there anything else, or any other incident that comes to mind, from a client point of view, where mindfulness has really helped them, almost like to be, maybe even if they tried something else, like I mentioned now, the example of I just don't know Mike Dillon, but is there anything that you kind of came across where it's really helped someone to almost change a lot?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the time, the way that I see it working the most in my practice is how overpowering our thoughts can be. And understanding that if I'm mindful of what I'm experiencing right now and anchoring ourselves in the present moment, however we do that, then we can start understanding the power of those thoughts and the stories that they're now telling me. And then we work through that our reality is not our thoughts or our emotions, that is not our reality. And then rediscovering who we are or what meaning is coming to our lives outside of that thought process. So I suppose the way that I see it helping the most, and the way that my clients have benefited most from it, is re-looking at the narrative and the story that they're telling ourselves based on our thought process. So it's quietening that down so that I can step into what's going on and do the work. I can't do the work if I'm stuck in my head and the story that's repeating on the cycle. So I think that's the key element in answering that question that's come up, and different ways that we tackle it in therapy. But ultimately it is unpacking that unconscious thought pattern and emotionality, and that our knee-jerk reactions to life, so that I can do the healing, I can do the work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does a lot. I mean, and I think just by you saying that, gives the rest of us hope that, even if we were stuck in there, hopefully reach out to people like yourself that could help you through this process. But then also, I mean, just to know, there's something about the human mind as well. If we know someone else has done it, it's much more easier for us to think that we can do it. And I think just by you saying that means that other people have gotten help, other people have figured it out, through assistance, like yourself, or from people like yourself. But thanks very much for saying that. Shaz, on your side, anything that we should have asked Candice that we didn't?
So I have a bit of probably an off the wall question, but being a psychologist and trying to help patients actually tap into that mindfulness, are there any specific therapeutic modalities that you use to help people with this? Things like CBT or BWRT or those kind of things to actually help make those conscious choices to slow down and be more mindful?
So I work from a psychodynamic perspective, which is all about understanding our kind of unconscious patterns of relating. So, I mean, and not that it's not tied in, but I think the closest would be CBT. I even think there's a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy that's come out after the stress reduction mindfulness program. So it follows quite a rigid is maybe not fair, very structured program of what you do every day. So CBT would speak most, in my opinion, most closely with mindfulness in terms of the activities and the structure of it. But I don't work necessarily in a CBT manner. I work psychodynamically, looking at the patterns of relating, which includes our thoughts and emotions. I just use elements of either we start with a breathing technique, or I have some semi-precious stones in my office where if someone's feeling incredibly anxious, feeling the weight, feeling the texture, kind of just coming into it. And then we do the talking therapy aspect of everything and understanding it, but using mainly the breath and some grounding techniques to then tap into what's going on.
That is amazing. I think, as you say, then I have to ask another question, which is the metal, like the semi-precious
stones,
metals that you stones that you mentioned. Is that like the rose quartz and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we do that as well. It's actually amazing with that, hey? I mean,
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we had it in the office, and I was telling Shaz, like in the one room where we had lots of like meetings, the stone actually turned color, and it didn't in any of the other rooms. And I thought that was like the most incredible thing ever, and it almost like absorbed, some of that negative energy or something. That's my theory. I don't know if that's true or not. But
energy, the science. There you go. There's physics in that too, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what I thought, and I was like, because it was the most obscure thing, that it was only that one Heshas that turned color, and in every other room it was actually fine. And in retrospect, that was quite a difficult year for us, and we had lots of hectic meetings in that one room, and it kind of showed, which was interesting. Candice, on your side, I mean, we try our best. I love this conversation, and I loved how it flowed, and we try to keep to the time, but obviously with this one we missed that completely, and all for good reason, because it just flowed one after the other. And I think your stories were amazing. I think how you brought about the points was amazing. I think also the supporting supporting info, like the books and stuff like that. We'll try to have all of those as resources. If you want to send it to us, we'll make sure it's in the show notes as well. But I love this. But anything that you thought we should have asked you around mindfulness that we didn't?
No, I also feel like we could talk about this for hours, and I do think we've tapped into, I think, really the core and the essence of mindfulness in this. And I know, again, like any of the topics, we can go on and on and on about it, but I think this is a really good platform and starting point. And I will send those resources through. You can add it, as you say, to the show notes. There are so many tools to tap into and utilize on our journey, and something's going to resonate with you now, and something's going to resonate with you maybe in 6 months, 6 years. It's about knowing kind of what's out there and tapping into it when you need it and when it resonates with you. That's also what's important. It's not speaking to you now, that's fine. But being open, that beginner's mind, being open to it at some other time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it would be arrogant to think that we could cover mindfulness in an hour and a half. But I think the whole thing was just to put a face to, the topic, and also to say, as you said now, which is perfect. Sometimes when it's just at the back of your mind, and then you're going to remember that, oh, okay, Candice said that, and I would like to go back to that or research that a little bit more. But the other thing that you brought out very, very clearly is how simple it could be if you allow yourself and give yourself permission to do it. And I think that was amazing. So thanks very much for doing this. Thanks for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. One last thing as we're closing off, I just want to say is that mindfulness is not necessarily the answer to life problems. Rather, it is that all life's problems can be seen more clearly through a lens of a clear mind. And I think that also, just in closing, is so powerful. It's not going to take it all away, but we can see things more clearly and we can respond more appropriately when our mind is clear. And that's what we're wanting to cultivate.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I think it's like with everything, there's no silver bullet or a magic pull that you can just take to magically just let it go away. But yeah, thanks again.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Candice. This was amazing.
Thank you, Shaz. Thanks for having me here.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.